Somewhere right now, there's a version of you standing at exactly zero. No routine, no system, no habit that stuck for longer than a few days before life got in the way, and it quietly disappeared. If that's where you are, I want to say something before anything else. Zero is not a bad place to start from. It's actually the easiest place to start from, because there's nothing broken that needs to be dismantled first. There's just empty space, and empty space is where structure works best. Most people at zero assume they're behind. Behind people who already run 5 miles a day, behind people who already wake up at 5 without an alarm, behind some imaginary version of a disciplined person they've built in their head from watching other people's highlight reels. That comparison is not just unfair, it's structurally wrong. A person who already has habits in place isn't running some superior version of willpower. They just have systems that started, at some point, from a version of zero that looked exactly like yours does right now. It's worth remembering that every single person whose routine looks impressive from the outside once stood exactly where you're standing, with zero habits, zero systems, and the same quiet doubt about whether any of it would actually stick this time. Nobody is born with a habit tracker already filled in. The only real difference between where you are and where they are now is roughly 30 days, repeated enough times, with a structure small enough to actually survive them. By the end of this, you'll have 10 specific habits, small enough that starting from literally nothing won't matter, and structured in a way that makes 30 days feel less like a test of willpower and more like watching a pattern quietly assemble itself. This isn't about becoming a different person overnight. It's about installing 10 small mechanisms that, together, start doing the work that motivation was never reliable enough to do on its own. Nothing on this list will feel dramatic while you're doing it. And that's worth naming clearly right at the start, because dramatic is usually what people expect from a video with a title like this one. There's no single moment of transformation coming. What's coming instead is 30 ordinary days, each one slightly less effortful than the one before it, until the sum of them looks, from the outside, exactly like the transformation people were expecting all along. I want to be honest with you about something personal here. I've started from zero more than once in my life. Not metaphorically, literally. There were stretches where I had no morning routine, no exercise, no system for anything, and every attempt to fix that in one giant leap collapsed within a week. What actually worked, eventually, wasn't a bigger leap. It was 10 small, almost embarrassingly easy things, stacked one at a time, that quietly rebuilt the entire structure of a day. I remember one specific stretch, after a period where nothing in my routine had held for longer than a few days, where I tried exactly the kind of overhaul I'm warning you against here. New diet, new gym plan, new sleep schedule, all beginning the same Monday. By Thursday, I'd missed the gym once, which turned into skipping the diet plan that evening out of frustration, which turned into sleeping through the new wake time by the weekend. One failed piece dragged down 4 others that had nothing structurally wrong with them, purely because they were all launched together, with none of them stable enough to survive the others wobbling. That collapse is what eventually led me to build a list almost identical to the one you're watching right now, small enough, individually, that no single bad day could take down the whole structure with it. Here's the part most people never figure out, and it's the reason this list works when other lists don't. The habits themselves aren't the hard part. The hard part is always the moment right before you start one, and that moment gets resolved by how small and specific the habit is, not by how much you want it. So keep that in mind as we go through these. None of them are supposed to feel impressive. That's exactly the point. You might be wondering why this list settles on exactly 10, rather than 3 or 5 simpler ones. The answer has to do with how a full day is actually structured, not with some arbitrary preference for round numbers. 3 habits can improve a morning. 10 habits, spread deliberately across morning, day, and night, rebuild the entire day, end to end, without leaving large stretches of unstructured time where the old default patterns can quietly creep back in. Each of the 10 occupies a specific moment. Waking, the first minutes out of bed, before the phone, during the day, and before sleep, so that by day 30, there's no meaningful part of your day left running on the old system that got you to zero in the first place. This is also why the order matters more than it might seem to at first glance. Each habit on this list was placed deliberately either before or after the ones around it, building a chain where completing one makes the next slightly more natural, rather than 10 disconnected tasks competing for attention throughout the day. Waking at a fixed time makes the bed a natural next step. The made bed makes reaching for the water a natural next step. The water makes putting on shoes for the walk a natural next step. None of this is complicated, but the sequencing itself is doing real work that a randomly ordered list of the same 10 habits wouldn't do nearly as well. If you're new here, this channel exists for one purpose: helping people rebuild their lives quietly, through systems, not speeches. No hype, no countdown to some dramatic transformation, just structure, applied consistently, until the structure becomes who you are. If that's the kind of change you're after, staying subscribed means you're here as each new system gets built, piece by piece, instead of finding this channel after the pieces you needed were already covered. A quick like also helps this reach more people standing exactly where you are right now, at zero, looking for something that actually holds. There's no cost to sticking around, and there's a real cost to skipping this and going back to whatever wasn't working before. Another month at zero, telling yourself the next plan will be the one that finally sticks, when the actual missing piece was never a better plan, just a system small enough to survive contact with an ordinary, imperfect day. Let's talk about what starting from zero actually means, because most people misunderstand it in a way that sabotages them before day one. Starting from zero doesn't mean you lack discipline. It means no system currently exists in your day that channels your effort somewhere specific. Without a system, effort leaks out in every direction. You want to exercise, eat better, read more, sleep on time, and all of that wanting competes for the same limited attention with no structure to catch any of it. The person who seems to have it all together isn't spending more willpower than you. They've got 10 small mechanisms running quietly in the background, each one requiring almost no decision-making, freeing up the rest of their mind for everything else. This is why trying to build everything at once fails almost every time. When you try to overhaul your entire life in 1 week, new diet, new gym schedule, new sleep time, new morning routine, all starting Monday, you're asking your mind to hold 10 unstable systems simultaneously, none of which have had time to become automatic. One bad day, and the whole structure collapses at once, because nothing was stable enough yet to hold the others up. The habits in this list work differently. They stack one at a time, each one small enough to survive a bad day, and together they build something that no single ambitious overhaul ever could. I want to explain exactly why stacking works better than overhauling, because understanding the mechanism is what will keep you from abandoning this list halfway through the way you might have abandoned other plans before. Every habit you already have running on autopilot: brushing your teeth, locking the door on your way out, checking for your keys before you leave, took almost no willpower to perform today, even though at some point in your life, every single one of them required conscious effort. That's what a habit actually is, an action that used to cost willpower and now costs almost nothing, because it's been repeated enough times that your mind stopped treating it as a decision. The 10 habits on this list are designed to reach that same automatic state, but only if you give each one room to actually stabilize before adding pressure elsewhere. That's why they're introduced here as a full list, but the real instruction underneath all of it is patience. Not the passive kind, but the active kind, where you keep showing up for the same 10 small things every day, trusting that the automation is happening even on the days it doesn't feel like it. Habit 1. Wake up at the same time, every day, no exceptions for the first 30 days. This is the anchor habit, and it goes first because everything else in this list depends on it existing. A fixed wake time gives your entire day a stable starting point, which means every other habit has a predictable moment to attach itself to. Without this, your other habits float. Sometimes you do them, sometimes the day gets away from you before you remember, and inconsistency compounds until nothing sticks. The mistake most people make here is picking a wake time based on some ideal version of themselves, 5 a.m., because that's what disciplined people supposedly do. Ignore that entirely. Pick a wake time you can actually hit for 30 straight days, even if it's later than you'd like. Consistency beats earliness by an enormous margin. A person who wakes at 7 every single day for 30 days has built infinitely more structure than someone who wakes at 5 twice and sleeps through their alarm the other 5 days that week. Set the time. Put the alarm across the room if you have to, so turning it off requires standing up. That's the whole habit for week 1. Nothing else. Just the same time, every day, regardless of how the previous day went. I want to be specific about why no exceptions matters more than the actual time you choose. The first time you allow an exception, sleeping in because it's the weekend, or because you went to bed late, or because you deserve it after a hard week. You've just taught your mind that this habit is negotiable, and negotiable habits get renegotiated constantly until there's nothing left of them. This doesn't mean punishing yourself if you miss it once. It means treating the fixed time as fixed, the same way you treat a flight departure time. Not because missing it once is catastrophic, but because treating it as movable from day 1 guarantees it moves permanently by day 10. Habit 2. Make your bed within 2 minutes of getting up. This one gets dismissed constantly because it sounds too small to matter, and that's precisely the point. It's not on this list because a made bed changes your life. It's here because it's the first completed action of your day, and completed actions produce a small, immediate signal that you're a person who follows through. A signal your mind uses as evidence when it decides whether the next habit is worth attempting. There's no complexity here. You wake up at your fixed time, and within 2 minutes, the bed is made. It doesn't need to look impressive. It needs to be done consistently, so that by day 10, doing it doesn't require a single thought. Your body just does it as an extension of getting up, the same way you'd close a door behind you without deciding to. What makes this habit worth including, specifically in the first week, is how little it asks of you while still producing a real result you can see. There's no equipment, no preparation, no risk of doing it wrong. It exists purely to give your mind one small, completed, visible win before anything else in the day has a chance to go sideways. On the days when everything else falls apart, and in the first 30 days, some days will, you still made your bed. That's not nothing. That's proof the whole system didn't collapse, even when one part of it wobbled. Habit 3. Drink a full glass of water before anything else, before your phone, before coffee, before checking a single notification. This habit works on 2 levels at once. Physically, most people wake up mildly dehydrated after hours without water, and that dehydration shows up as low-grade fatigue that gets misread as not being a morning person. Drinking water first thing removes that variable before it has a chance to color the rest of your morning. But the real reason this habit is on the list is the second layer. It's the first habit that competes directly with your phone for the first moment of your day, and winning that competition, even in this small, low-stakes way, matters more than people expect. Whoever gets your attention first in the morning tends to set the tone for the next hour. If it's your phone, you inherit someone else's agenda before you've had a single original thought. If it's a glass of water, you've made one small decision entirely on your own terms before anything else touches your attention. Keep a glass by your bed the night before, if you have to, so there's no decision left to make in the morning beyond picking it up and drinking it. Removing the need for a decision is, at this point, a theme you should be noticing across every single one of these habits. There's a reason this habit sits at position 3 instead of somewhere later in the list. By the time you reach it, you've already woken at your fixed time and made your bed. 2 small wins already banked before you've even left the bedroom. Adding the water here means 3 completed actions before a single external input, whether that's a notification, a conversation, or a piece of news, has had any chance to shape your morning. 3 small, deliberate choices made entirely on your own terms before the day starts making choices for you. Habit 4. Move your body for 10 minutes every day, starting with something as simple as walking or a light jog. This is where running or a short walk earns its place on this list, and I want to be specific about why it's 10 minutes and not an hour-long workout you'll abandon by day 4. 10 minutes is short enough that there's no reasonable excuse against it, on even the busiest or worst day of the 30. And because it's genuinely achievable every single day, it becomes the first physical habit most people starting from 0 actually keep past the first week, which matters more than the specific exercise itself. Don't overthink the format. Walk around the block, jog to the corner, and back. The goal in these first 30 days isn't fitness, even though you'll likely see some benefit. The goal is proving to yourself, in a physical, undeniable way, that you follow through on commitments to your own body, a proof that becomes the foundation for a real exercise habit down the line. Once 10 minutes has become so automatic that adding 5 more feels natural instead of forced. If you have shoes by the door, ready to go, the decision point almost disappears entirely. You're not deciding whether to exercise. You're just putting on shoes that are already there and walking out a door that's already open. I want to address something directly because it's the single most common reason this specific habit gets abandoned before day 5. The urge to make it harder than 10 minutes the moment it starts feeling easy. Around day 8 or 9, 10 minutes will start to feel almost too simple, and the temptation to jump straight to 30 minutes, or add a stricter pace, or turn it into a full workout, will show up right on schedule. Resist that for the full 30 days. The goal of this specific habit, in this specific window, was never fitness. It was proving, daily, without exception, that you follow through on a physical commitment to yourself. Once that's fully automatic, expanding it becomes easy, because you're adding to something stable instead of trying to stabilize something ambitious. Habit 5. Track exactly one habit, visibly, using a simple tracker you can see every single day. Here's something almost nobody tells people trying to build habits from scratch. Tracking a habit changes your relationship to it, independent of the habit itself. The moment you can see a physical record of consistency, even something as simple as marking an X on a calendar or filling in a box on paper, your mind starts protecting that visible streak the same way it protects anything else it's invested effort into. Missing a day stops being invisible. It becomes a visible gap staring back at you, and most people will go out of their way to avoid creating that gap once they can see it forming. Don't try to track all 10 habits at once. That turns tracking itself into a chore heavy enough to become its own form of avoidance. Pick one habit from this list, ideally the wake-up time or the movement habit, since those are the most measurable, and track only that one for the full 30 days. A simple grid on paper, or an actual habit tracker if you have one, works far better than a complicated app with streaks, badges, and notifications competing for your attention. The simpler the tracker, the longer you'll actually use it. What you're really building here isn't just a record of one habit. You're building the skill of noticing your own consistency in real time, which is a skill that transfers to every habit you build after these 30 days are over. Put the tracker somewhere you physically pass every day, on the wall next to where you keep your shoes, or on the same surface as the notebook you'll start using in Habit 6. The location matters almost as much as the tracker itself, because a tracker buried in a drawer produces none of the effect a visible one does. You need to see the gaps forming in real time, not discover them a week later when the pattern has already broken. There's something quietly powerful about a physical mark you make with your own hand, every day, that has nothing to do with an app's notification reminding you to check in. It's a small ritual, entirely yours, that takes about 4 seconds and reinforces everything else on this list every single time you do it. Before we go further into the list, I want to pause here, because everything we've covered so far, the fixed wake time, the small physical wins, the water, the movement, the tracking, all of it works best when it's paired with something that trains the actual mechanism underneath every habit, your mind's relationship with resistance itself. That's the entire premise behind the K.M.A method. 5 minutes a day, built specifically to train your mind to notice resistance the moment it shows up and move through it deliberately, instead of letting it quietly derail whatever habit you were trying to build that day. It's not a replacement for the 10 habits on this list. It's the thing running underneath all of them, making each one easier to sustain past the point where most people quietly give up. I've used it during periods where I was rebuilding from zero myself, and what I noticed wasn't some dramatic shift. It was that the small resistance I used to feel before the 10-minute walk, or before getting out of bed at the fixed time, started showing up quieter and passing faster. That's not a coincidence. It's exactly what training this specific mechanism is supposed to do. The reason this matters specifically for a list like this one is that habits 1 through 5 are the ones most likely to get tested hardest in the first 2 weeks, before any of them have had time to become automatic. That's precisely the window where a 5-minute daily practice aimed at the resistance itself makes the biggest difference, not by making the habits easier in some abstract sense, but by shrinking the exact moment where most people talk themselves out of the 10 minutes, the glass of water, or the fixed wake time. If you want to see exactly how it works, point your camera at the QR code on screen right now, or check the link sitting in the description. Take 30 seconds to look at it, and then come back, because there's still 5 more habits to get through, and they matter just as much as the first 5. Habit 6. Write one single line every night about the day in an actual notebook before bed. This is not journaling in the elaborate sense most people imagine and then avoid because it feels like too much. One line. What happened, what you noticed, how the day went. A single sentence, written by hand. In an actual notebook, you keep somewhere visible. The physical notebook matters here more than people expect. Writing by hand, even briefly, forces a small pause that a phone note never quite produces. And that pause is where most of the actual value of this habit lives. Over 30 days, one line a day becomes 30 lines, and reading back through even a partial month gives you something almost no other habit on this list provides directly. Proof, in your own handwriting, that the version of you at day 1 was different from the version at day 30. Most people trying to change never get to see that proof because they never wrote any of it down, and change that isn't documented tends to feel like it never happened at all, even when it clearly did. Keep the notebook by your bed, next to where you already keep the glass of water from habit 3. One less decision, one more thing already in place before the moment you need it. Resist the urge to make this longer than one line, especially on days when you have more to say. The temptation to write a full page will show up eventually, usually after a particularly good or particularly hard day, and giving in occasionally is fine, but the habit that survives 30 days is the one-line version, because it's small enough to complete even on the night you're exhausted, distracted, or simply don't feel like reflecting on anything. A full page requires a mood. One line only requires a pen. Habit 7. Protect the first hour after you wake up from your phone entirely. Notice this isn't reduce phone use or check your phone less, which are both far too vague to actually change anything. This is specific. The first hour, no phone, full stop. That hour is when the fixed wake time, the made bed, the water, the movement, and the notebook line all happen. And if your phone gets involved anywhere in that sequence, everything after it gets pulled into someone else's notifications, someone else's news, someone else's opinion about how your morning should go, before you've had a single uninterrupted hour that belonged only to you. This is often the hardest habit on the list for people starting from zero, not because it's complicated, but because the pull toward the phone the moment you wake up has usually been reinforced for years, sometimes decades. Make it easier on yourself by charging your phone in another room overnight. So the first hour without it isn't a test of willpower. It's simply a physical fact, because the phone isn't within reach until you walk over and get it. If charging it in another room isn't realistic for you, at minimum turn it face down, on airplane mode, somewhere outside arm's reach from the bed. The specific method matters less than the underlying principle. Whatever makes checking it require more than a half-asleep reach is what actually protects the hour, not the intention to try not to check it, which almost never survives contact with an actual notification lighting up the screen. Habit 8. Spend 5 minutes every night planning tomorrow, before you go to sleep. Most people wake up and let the day's structure get decided in real time, which means every single morning starts with a series of small decisions. What to do first, what matters most, what can wait. And every decision point is another opportunity for the day to quietly slip into avoidance before it's even begun. 5 minutes the night before removes almost all of that. Write down the 1 or 2 things that actually matter tomorrow, in the order you'll do them. Specific enough that tomorrow you doesn't have to decide anything except to follow the list that today you already made. This habit works particularly well paired with habit 6, the one-line notebook entry. Write the line about today, then write tomorrow's plan directly underneath it, in the same notebook, same page. 2 habits, 1 object, 1 moment before sleep, which means less friction getting either of them done consistently. Keep the plan itself brutally simple. 1 or 2 items, not 5. The version of this habit that fails is the one where someone writes an ambitious 10-item list every night, feels behind by 10 in the morning, and eventually stops writing the list altogether rather than face the mismatch between what got planned and what actually happened. 1 or 2 things, chosen deliberately as the items that actually matter, protects the habit from that exact failure. Habit 9. Spend 10 minutes a day learning something specific, not passively consuming content about it. There's an important distinction buried in this habit that most people miss. Watching videos about a skill, scrolling through articles about self-improvement, listening to podcasts about becoming a better version of yourself. None of that counts here. even though it feels productive. This habit is about active learning. Reading 10 pages of an actual book, practicing 10 minutes of an actual skill, working through 10 minutes of an actual course, something where you're doing rather than absorbing. 10 minutes sounds small because it is small, and that's deliberate, matching the same logic behind the movement habit. The goal for these first 30 days isn't mastery of anything. It's proving that you can consistently choose active learning over passive consumption, in a dose small enough that there's no reasonable excuse against it, even on your busiest day. Pick the 10 minutes at a fixed point in your day, ideally attached to something that already happens reliably, like right after the movement habit or right before the nightly planning habit. Attaching a new habit to an existing one, rather than leaving it floating somewhere in an undefined sometime today, is one of the most reliable ways to make sure it actually happens instead of quietly sliding to the bottom of a mental list that never gets checked. Habit 10. Review your week once a week, using the same notebook from Habit 6. At the end of each week during these 30 days, take 10 minutes to read back through that week's daily lines and write a short summary underneath. What worked, what didn't, and one small adjustment for the coming week. This is the habit that turns the other 9 from a static list into a system that improves itself. Without review, you're just repeating the same 9 actions for 30 days, hoping they add up to something. With review, you're actively noticing what's working, what's slipping, and adjusting in real time, the way any system that actually improves over time is built to do. This is also where you'll notice something most people never expect from a list like this. Some of these 10 habits will feel completely automatic by week 3, and 1 or 2 might still feel like a fight every single day. That's normal, and the weekly review is where you catch that pattern early, instead of only noticing it in hindsight 30 days later when it's harder to fix. Be honest during this review, even when honesty is uncomfortable. If you missed the movement habit 4 times in 1 week, write that down plainly instead of softening it. The review only works if it reflects what actually happened, not the version of the week you'd prefer to remember. And use the adjustment you write down. If the 10-minute learning habit keeps sliding because it's scheduled at a bad time, move it. The habits on this list are a starting structure, not a rigid contract. The weekly review is what keeps that structure honest and alive instead of becoming 10 rules you either follow perfectly or quietly abandon. So what should you actually expect if you run all 10 of these for the full 30 days, starting from genuinely nothing? Don't expect a dramatic transformation by day 7. Most of the real change in this list is invisible in the first week, because you're mostly just fighting the friction of habits that haven't become automatic yet. Somewhere around day 10 to 14, most people notice the first shift, not a huge one, just a slight decrease in how much these 10 things feel like effort. By day 20, several of them, usually the wake time, the bed, and the water, tend to run almost entirely on autopilot. By day 30, you won't have 10 habits anymore in the sense of 10 separate efforts. You'll have one morning that happens to contain all 10, requiring roughly the mental effort of doing one thing, because the rest have folded into the background. Let me break this down week by week, because vague timelines are part of what makes people quit early, when in reality they were right on schedule the entire time. In week 1, expect almost everything to feel deliberate and slightly effortful. This is completely normal, and it's not a sign the system isn't working, it's a sign the system hasn't had time to automate yet. In week 2, expect the physical habits, the bed and the water specifically, to start requiring noticeably less thought, while the phone-free hour and the 10-minute movement habit may still feel like active choices each day. In week 3, expect most of the morning sequence to run together almost as one motion, with the evening habits, the notebook, the planning, the learning, starting to catch up in automaticity. In week 4, expect the whole structure to feel less like 10 things you're doing and more like the way your day simply happens now, with occasional days where 1 or 2 habits still require a deliberate push, especially if the week has been unusually stressful or disrupted. Be honest with yourself that not every habit will land equally well. Some people find the phone-free hour nearly effortless and struggle enormously with the 10-minute movement habit. Others find the opposite. That's fine and expected. The point of running all 10 simultaneously isn't that each one will feel identical in difficulty. It's that together, they rebuild the entire structure of a day, and a structure with 9 strong habits and one still wobbly habit is still an enormous improvement over the 0 you started at. It's also worth setting a realistic expectation about setbacks, because they will happen, and treating them as evidence of failure is one of the fastest ways to abandon a system that was actually working. A missed morning because you overslept once. A skipped notebook entry because you fell asleep before you got to it. A phone that got checked at minute 20 instead of minute 60. None of these are the collapse of the plan. They're the normal texture of 30 real days, lived by a real person, not 30 perfect days lived by a version of you that doesn't exist and was never the goal in the first place. A few things to watch out for as you go through these 30 days. Don't add an 11th habit halfway through because you're feeling motivated around day 12. That motivation is real, but it's exactly the kind of impulse that derailed every previous attempt you've made at building habits. The urge to do more, right when momentum is finally building, which then overloads the system before any of these 10 have fully stabilized. Resist it. Let these 10 run their full 30 days before you consider adding anything else. This particular trap deserves extra attention because it disguises itself as a good sign rather than a warning sign. Feeling motivated enough to want more usually means the first few habits are working, which feels like proof you're ready for the next level. But readiness for more isn't measured by how you feel on a good day. It's measured by whether the current 10 habits survive a bad week without you. If you're not sure they would, that's your answer, and the correct response is to keep running exactly what you have, not to expand it. Don't treat a missed day as a reason to restart from 0, and don't treat it as evidence that the whole system doesn't work for you. A missed day is just a missed day. The habit that actually protects you from a missed day becoming a missed week is the weekly review. That's exactly where you catch it, name it, and get back to the fixed wake time the very next morning, without turning one gap into a collapse of the entire structure. There's a specific pattern worth naming here, because it catches almost everyone at some point during a 30-day stretch. One missed day turns into, well, I already broke the streak, so today doesn't matter either, which turns into 3 missed days, which turns into quietly abandoning the whole list by day 15, having never actually failed at the habits themselves, only at the story being told about what one missed day meant. The habits didn't stop working. The narrative around a single gap did the damage, and the narrative is completely within your control to rewrite the moment you notice it forming. And don't judge these 30 days against some version of yourself who's already disciplined, already consistent, already 3 years into a strong routine. You're building from 0. The comparison that actually matters is between day 1 of this and day 30 of this, not between you and someone who started years before you did. One last thing worth being careful about. Don't let the notebook, the tracker, or the planning become more elaborate than they need to be. It's tempting, especially for people who enjoy the idea of building systems, to turn a simple notebook into an elaborate bullet journal with color-coded sections, or a basic tracker into a spreadsheet with formulas and charts. Every hour spent perfecting the tool is an hour not spent using it, and a beautifully designed system that gets abandoned by week 2 is worth far less than an ugly, functional one that survives all 30 days. Keep every tool in this list as plain as possible for the entire month. There will be time to make things elaborate later, once the habits themselves no longer depend on the tool being simple enough to not get in their own way. This applies just as much to the running or walking habit as it does to the notebook. Resist the urge to research the perfect running shoes, the ideal route, or the best time of day before you've even done it once. The research feels productive, the same way the disguised procrastination we discussed earlier feels productive, and it produces the same result: a well-informed person who still hasn't taken a single step. Whatever shoes are already in your closet, whatever street is already outside your door, is the correct starting equipment for day 1. Upgrade later, once the habit itself no longer depends on the upgrade to happen. If you've made it this far, here's what I want you to actually understand about why this specific combination of 10 small habits works when bigger, more ambitious plans usually fail. None of them require motivation to start, because none of them are big enough to need it. What they require is a system that catches the moment resistance shows up before it has a chance to talk you out of the 2-minute version of each one. That's exactly what the K.M.A method was built to train. 5 minutes a day, aimed directly at the moment resistance appears, so that showing up for these 10 habits stops, depending on how you feel that morning, and starts running as something closer to automatic. Think about how many times in the past you've had a plan almost identical to this one. A list, a checklist, a set of good intentions written down somewhere, and watched it dissolve within 2 weeks. Not because the plan was bad, but because nothing was training the actual moment where the plan met resistance, day after day. That's the gap this fills. It's not a longer list of things to do. It's the missing piece underneath every list you've ever tried to keep. If you're serious about actually making it to day 30 this time, instead of quietly stopping around day 6 the way most attempts do, this is worth 5 minutes of your time today. Point your camera at the QR code on screen, or check the link in the description, and take a real look at it before you close this video. Now, here's what I want you to actually do before you go anywhere else. Pick one habit from this list. Just one, not all 10 at once, and do it today. Not tomorrow, not once you've bought a notebook or found the perfect tracker. If it's the water, drink a glass right now. If it's the walk, get up after this video ends and take it. Tell me in the comments which one of these 10 you're starting with today, and where exactly you're starting from. What 0 actually looks like for you right now. I want to see the real starting points, not the polished version people usually post, because the real starting point is the only place any of this ever actually begins. Don't wait for a cleaner starting point than the one you actually have. There's no version of tomorrow where you have more time, more motivation, or a more convenient moment to begin than the one sitting in front of you right now, at the end of this video, exactly as messy and unfinished as it is. I mean that literally, write it out. Not, I want to get healthier, but the actual habit and the actual first action, today, in specific terms. Something like, Habit 4, walking to the end of the street and back, right after I finish watching this. That kind of specificity is the same principle this entire video has been built around, applied one more time, right here in the comments, before you even close the tab. If this gave you an actual plan instead of another vague push to just be more disciplined, subscribe, and share it with someone who's been stuck at 0 for longer than they'd like to admit. Send it to the person who's mentioned wanting to change something for months, but never quite started. Not as a hint, just as something that might actually help them the way it's meant to help you. There's a full system being built here, one piece at a time, for people who'd rather change quietly than announce it. 30 days from now, you'll either still be at 0, telling yourself the next plan will be the one, or you'll be looking back at a month where 10 small, unremarkable things quietly became the structure of an entire life. The difference between those two outcomes was never a matter of who you are. It was always just a matter of which one you actually started today. One missed day, one imperfect week, one habit that takes longer than the others to click into place. None of it erases the 30 days you actually showed up for. That's the whole system, laid out in front of you now. What happens with it next is the only part that was ever really up to you. Keep building. Quietly, if you have to. Just keep building.